Hello, everyone. Welcome to the River Forest Library Trustee Candidate Forum brought to you by the River Forest Library and the League of Women Voters of Oak Park and River Forest.
Well, good evening and welcome to the River Forest Library Board Candidate Forum. This race is for 2 open seats on the library board. My name is Peggy Kell. I'm the Voter Service Chair for the League of Women Voters of Oak Park and River Forest. The League is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse candidates, but seeks to register and educate voters on local, state, and national issues so they can make more informed voting decisions. Early voting started on March 10th at local courthouses and will start locally on March 22nd at the Oak Park Village Hall. Election day is April 6th. Following this forum tonight, there will be a 8 o'clock forum for the River Forest Park Board, and you can still register for that forum on the River Forest Library website. Many thanks to Megan O'Keefe from the River Forest Library for all our technical expertise and help in getting this set up. And also to member Leslie Lauderdale, who will be our timer tonight. So the ground rules for the forum is being recorded. Candidates will be given 1-minute opening and closing statements. And after opening statements, the same questions will be asked of all 3 candidates with 1 minute to answer. Order of speaking will alternate and statements and questions will be timed. I, as moderator, will read the questions that are submitted in advance or can still be submitted via the chat on the option of the Zoom option. As moderator, I'll make sure questions are appropriate and avoid duplication. Candidates, are you ready? Okay. So we're going to start with opening statements. And so Anne, you're going to start first with your opening statement of 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Ann Berens. I have lived in River Forest for almost 20 years. It will be 20 years this summer. And I am running for library board because I am a big believer in libraries. I participate in news and am very active in our current libraries in our community. I have spent the last 10 years working in District 90 libraries. Most recently, I spent 4 years at Willard Elementary, and then before that, 6 years at Roosevelt Middle School. I currently work as a reference librarian at Concordia University, so I'm very aware of the libraries that we have here in this community. I believe that I can be an advocate for not only the librarians, but for the community as well. I believe I know a lot of your kids or have come across them over time, and I would like to be your advocate as well. So I look forward to getting your vote. Thank you, Ellen and Megan, if I didn't say that already. And I also wanted to thank Katie and Kathy for running because that makes for a good community. And to all of you who are here tonight, thank you.
Thank you. Catherine?
Thank you, Peggy. And thank you to League of Women Voters and to the library for hosting these forums. My name is Katherine Bevin, and I'm running for re-election to the library board. I'm a lifelong library lover, an active patron, and I'm currently raising a group of library super users, ages 5, 9, and 10. I think libraries are part of a strong social fabric in a community, and I'm honored to serve River Forest as a member of the Library Board of Trustees. On my 6 years on this board, I have served as treasurer and vice president and worked on the policy and finance committees. I've used my finance background, critical thinking skills, and perspective as a young family to help optimize library operations, clarify strategic goals, and continually look to the future of our library. I look forward to serving another term to help the library maintain and expand its impact on our community.
Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you to the League and the library for hosting us. I'm Kathy Ruggieri. I'm a lawyer by training, a graduate of the University of Chicago Law School. I practiced as an estate planning attorney for 10 years and then became a stay-at-home mom and active volunteer in the community. I have 2 children who are graduates of OPRF. My family moved to River Forest about 20 years ago. I've spent a lot of time in libraries as a patron, employee, and volunteer. Last summer, I started attending library board meetings and studying the library budgets and policies, which confirmed that there were many areas where my experience would be valuable. The board is responsible for strategic planning, providing the staff with facilities and funding resources, and overseeing the director who supervises day-to-day operations. These are areas where I have solid expertise from the 30 years I have served on or chaired school and church committees. I decided to run for the library board because I value our library and believe that I have the skills to help ensure the library's continued success. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we're going to start with questions. Again, the questions are given to all the candidates, the same question. You have 1 minute to answer. Again, if you need me to repeat the question, just ask and I will do so. So Catherine, you're going to start with the first question. What is your #1 priority for the library?
Sure. I think the first priority has to be to continue being flexible and responsive to patron needs as we continually, we've been working through this crisis over the past year and the library's had to reinvent itself several times. I think that it was difficult, but actually has brought some things that we can learn from. For instance, when you have meetings on Zoom, sometimes people can access who couldn't maybe come in person. I myself would have difficulty attending an evening interview session like this, but it's on Zoom, it's recorded. The library's learning that their virtual programming has ways to be successful. We don't know exactly what the public health guidelines will be in the future. The library needs to be responsive to those and to patron needs as the circumstances change so that we can continue to serve the community.
Thank you. Kathy?
I think the library should continue the initiatives that it either started or ramped up during the pandemic. By continuing these initiatives post-pandemic, I think it'll enable it to serve the diverse community in River Forest. And also it will help to remove barriers to access that some patrons may find in trying to access the materials that the library offers. Some of these initiatives that the library either started or continued during the pandemic include loaning out tech hardware, for example, like e-readers and Wi-Fi hotspots that enable patrons who otherwise might not be able to get online access the online materials. In addition, the library increased its partnership with the River Forest Township to help get materials to seniors who otherwise can't make it to the library. And they also started putting programming on Zoom, and they included closed captioning. So those are some of the initiatives I think the library should continue.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, yes. I think of libraries as almost a living organism. And this year has been tragic for a lot of people. And so I think the library has a real opportunity to help address the needs of the community, whether they be somewhat academic, whether they be somewhat social emotional. They can do that in a number of different ways through their programming, through their support services that they offer, and just even reaching out to the community with the books and resources that they may not be familiar with. So I do believe that the #1 goal for the library is to continue to service their patrons, but to also at this point be very conscious of what those needs are and how they've changed. I think they've done a wonderful job of pivoting, being a great resource while closed, many opportunities and resources, and I'm just curious to see how we can expand on that, but also still be conscious of what our current needs in this next phase post-pandemic might need and how we can do that.
Thank you. Kathy, you're going to take this next question first. The library has done a great job with after-school programming, but is limited by physical space. How can the library and the Park District work together to provide after-school programming?
Well, as you said, the library's meeting space is oversubscribed. They have to turn away a lot of people, hundreds of people who would like to use the facilities. As far as partnering with the Park District, it could, since the Park District has a lot of property just north of the library, if the library could move some of its programs outside, then it could expand the number of programs it could provide after school. In addition, perhaps it could partner with the Park District to come up with some content that it could put on Zoom. And the library has increased its programming online with the pandemic. And if some of the programming could be moved online, that could free up the meeting space for programs that would be more appropriately need to take place in person.
Thank you. Anne?
In terms of after-school programming and partnering with the Park District, I think that's a great opportunity. Based on its location, the library has always gotten a bunch of kids after school coming right out the doors of Roosevelt, crossing the parking lot and into the library. I would be curious if there wouldn't be a way that we could just keep those kids at Roosevelt. For example, is there a way that the multi-purpose room could be a space that the Park District orchestrates and borrows and uses to do some after school programming? It could still be coordinated with some programming in the library, but it would just be a bigger space and something that isn't typically used unless there's a teacher meeting or whatever. And that space is right there. I would look, because we live in Illinois and our weather isn't always great. I like Kathy's idea of doing things outside whenever possible, but you can't be confident the weather's going to cooperate. And so I would be looking at how we can use other school space in the community and develop those partnerships with the Park District, possibly running the programming.
Great. Thank you. Catherine?
Yes, I was kind of thinking along the same lines as Anne. I love the idea of working with other organizations in the community. And I think actually the question might be a little bit narrow because I believe the Park District is also limited in space, especially in those after school hours and especially inside. There is kind of a seasonality to the crush of people at the library. When the weather turns is when in a typical year, we do see more of those middle schoolers who do appreciate the programming that the library puts on, but also just kind of want to be in a safe space. I think we have seen during the pandemic, District 90 reaching out to other organizations. They have a partnership with the YMCA and to use spaces around town in kind of a creative way to meet families' needs. I think the township already funds a lot of the after school programming, and I'd like to hear what they think, what people need, and if maybe they have some other connections too that we could find a space to house some of that.
Great, thank you. Anne, you're going to start this next question first.
Okay.
How does the library respond when a book or other reading material is challenged? Are changes needed to this process?
Well, traditionally, a library board is partly responsible for handling challenges in that they are ones that set the policy and ensure that there are policies and procedures in place so that when challenges do arise, you fall back on those processes and procedures in terms of going forward. That's a very basic tenet in library school that all librarians learn right away. You need policies and procedures so that when a challenge does arise. So I don't know if that answers enough of your question, but it is something that really the librarians have the authority to handle, but they are blessed because the board also works with them in developing those policies and procedures.
Thank you. Catherine?
Sure, as Anne said, this is from a library board perspective, really all about the policies. Setting policy is one of the board's core responsibilities. The library is proud to subscribe to the American Library Association's Freedom to Read Act, which mainly takes a position. It's kind of inspiring if anyone wants to Google it later and read it. I always appreciate when it comes up in our policy review. Basically, libraries' role is to provide access to information more than to prevent access to information. And they really take the position that individuals are the ones responsible for judging maybe the suitability of materials. That being said, we do have a policy. It does start with the librarians who are trained staff. It would come up to the board if it needed to. I have to say that to my knowledge, there's never been a book challenge at the River Forest Public Library. We're a pretty educated community that I think believes in freedom of information. So I don't think anything needs to change at this point.
Thank you. Kathy?
As Catherine said, the board has a collection management policy that has the principles under which books are selected and retained. And these principles endorse principles adopted by the American Library Association. The if a challenge is lodged, it first goes to the staff members. And if the patron is not happy with the results of the staff member evaluation, they eventually can bring it to the board for review. But the board's policy, again, in retaining material is that banning is not the option preferred. Instead, I think that they would show the patron, I think, the diverse collection that the library does have, so that there are other alternative viewpoints and cultures. If they don't like a particular book, there are other books that they can choose from.
Thank you. Catherine, you're going to be next with this. You're going to be first with this next question. What can the library do to combat misinformation on topical items such as the COVID vaccine or election fraud?
I think that the library has many roles, and one of the real strengths of a library is librarians who are trained and skilled communicators at kind of finding the curating information. We live in a world where there's so much information out there, it can be difficult to find trusted sources. I think the library could perhaps link patrons up, whether on their website or maybe in person if people were having questions, with sources of trusted information so that people would know where to look. The library also, often has topical displays that they curate, they kind of rotate, and those would again provide quality materials that the librarians who have seen a wide spectrum of things can really recommend. And this is just one of the many reasons why we really value our library staff.
Thank you. Kathy?
Yes, I agree with Catherine that the librarians are the first line of defense against misinformation. They can point patrons to current and accurate sources of information if they're approached. The library also has a lot of ways to communicate information, communicate resources on its own initiative. It has a very vibrant website. It has library happenings where it could publicize resources, and the bookplate also can publicize resources. In addition, the library could put on programs, have authors, for example, or medical professionals have a Zoom program. Currently a Zoom program is what's available to provide accurate information to patrons.
Thank you. Anne?
I would also just kind of piggyback onto a lot of what Catherine and Kathy have talked about in terms of the librarians as being a real asset. I think our librarians have done a really great job of creating a lot of trust. A lot of people come to them for information because they believe what they're going to hear and they can trust them. I would also like to see, or one option, because oftentimes as a patron, you don't know how to respond to your friends as well. I think the library might be in an interesting position to put together just some FAQs that could just be a takeaway that while you're at the library, because not everybody that has questions is necessarily going to come first to the library, but that doesn't mean yourself as a library patron might not get those questions as well. And it's sometimes nice to have somebody else kind of giving you the verbiage of how to express yourself succinctly and with the proper details. FAQs, I also like Kathy's idea of doing Zooms where you might bring in professionals on various topics like medical professions.
Thank you. Kathy, you're going to start this next question first. What is your vision for the direction of the library over the next 4 years?
Well, one initiative I'd like to see the library take is to continue to grow the foundation. The Public Library Foundation, which has been a great source of non-tax revenue to support some initiatives, some strategic initiatives, and also some capital improvements in the library that the library otherwise could not have funded. In addition, I would like the library to address its problems with its meeting space. Its meeting space is oversubscribed. One initiative it could take to help alleviate that problem is to keep more programs on Zoom. There are some that work well on Zoom, and those could continue on Zoom. In addition, the library is looking to move some of its mechanicals out of a room next to the children's area and repurpose that space for patron use.
Thank you. Anne?
Over the next 4 years, I believe the library board is up for, or the library is going to be developing a new mission and strategic planning process. Maybe not a new mission statement, but at least go through the strategic planning process. And I think that's very important. And I think one of the first steps to start with that is kind of to better understand a needs assessment in terms of who the library is currently serving, who they're not serving, why they're not serving, and those people that they are serving, are they satisfied, and what more could they be doing? So I think over the next 4 years, I think it will be important to have that kind of foundational information help guide the new strategic plan. So I think a strategic plan is very critical. As Kathy had said, I agree there's some mechanical issues where right now the library is looking at changing out the air handler, which may provide some opportunities for some new things. And then importantly, I agree that the library hasn't tapped into either the Library Foundation or other avenues of revenue that could be used in this community from our patrons.
Thank you. Catherine?
I think, again, the first priority has to be how we come back out of our pandemic model, and what did we learn from it and what worked well, and starting to integrate the kind of new service models with the more traditional ones as they're permitted, and finding the best blend that I think can really serve more people more effectively. I think another priority would be to continue to more actively partner with other community organizations. For instance, last summer, the District 90 held many book clubs sponsored by teachers, and the library was able to handle the signups and pass out the books. It was a really great partnership that worked well to serve kids at a really difficult time. I also think that actively reaching out to other groups in the community can help us to reach more people and find out what their needs are. I think that people's needs might have changed as we're kind of facing a rapid rate of change right now. And it is important for the library to find out what that is and how we can best serve the community.
Thank you. Anne, you're going to start this next question first. What do you think is an acceptable rate of tax growth that you will work to achieve?
So first of all, let me just start by saying I am not deep into the tax laws and how they work in our community. That would be something that I would need to join the board and learn a little bit more about. But I will say that from my understanding right now, we are allowed, or the library is allowed to raise their levy by the cost of the consumer price index every year. They currently operate on a very shoestring budget, and that 2% increase that they probably are allowed to ask for every year does not go very far, let's just say. So I would want to, as a board member, I would want to be stewards of the library's funding. I would not be looking to tax the current patrons through their through our tax base, but rather try to come up with creative ways that we might use the Library Foundation and or create other fundraising opportunities to help with longer term projects in the library.
Thank you. Catherine?
Yes, I think I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking about the level of tax growth, because Anne is correct. We are not a home rule community, and we are limited in how much we can increase our levy each year. It does increase by the CPI, which during my tenure on the board has generally been close to 1%. And so this year it was a little bit over 2%, and that was cause kind of for celebration. We also can take a little bit from new growth in the village. I know sometimes there's talk, there's the new Sheridan building, which is an assisted living facility. And isn't that great for the schools? New tax revenue without new customers, but the library serves the whole village. So as the village has growth and development, we do intend as a library board to incorporate that into our budget, because we think that it will be be needed. If we mean going past that to a tax referendum, I do think the library would first want to more aggressively pursue grants, especially on the building side and capital improvements, before we ask the taxpayers for further funds.
Thank you. Kathy?
98% of the board's budget comes from property taxes. And we all appreciate the high tax burden that River Forest residents bear. However, I think that the library provides excellent service on a very tight budget. We get less than 2 cents of every tax dollar, every property tax dollar. And the board, as Catherine said, in the past year, it increased the tax levy by the CPI of 2.3%. I think that it's a fair rate of increase given the high quality library that residents expect and the high quality that the library delivers. And I think that what the board does with the budget it has is pretty remarkable. It funds not only operations out of the annual budget, but it also puts aside money for the capital reserve, and it funds the must-do projects out of that capital reserve budget without debt and without going to referendum.
Thank you. The next question, Catherine, you're going to start it. How can the River Forest Library contribute to helping the River Forest Maywood Covenant succeed? And what role should the library have on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee?
I think in terms of the Village Covenant, I don't think the libraries are kind of formal participants in that, but our library has in the past, not so much this year, I have to say, done kind of professional development on the board level with some other area libraries. And I'd like to see that continue and go forward into the future. It's a really great chance for trustees to hear what's going on in other communities. Also, library directors are talking to each other all the time. I think if there were some maybe shared programming or initiatives that the libraries wanted to work on together, that would be a great opportunity. But I think there probably needs to be some more groundwork laid before we get to that point. In terms of the village's EDI committee, the library has been working on this. It's in our strategic plan. The library has its own EDI committee, and we've been looking at our patron-facing policies through an equity lens using an equity toolkit questionnaire. So I'm not sure if we have a role in the village's process, but we do believe in that work.
Thank you. Kathy?
As Catherine said, the library isn't yet formally involved in the covenant, but it does have its own equity principles and equity training that the library staff follows. It's been having in-services on implicit bias, for example, and equitable hiring practices. As far as partnering with the village, it has some of the initiatives that the library has adopted, I think has helped it serve the needs of the community by partnering, for example, with the River Forest Township to serve seniors. And it also has adopted its own principles, I think, to advance equity within its own policies, such as eliminating the late fines, which have proven to be barriers to lower socioeconomic classes. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne?
You repeat the question, please?
Absolutely. How can the River Forest Library contribute to helping the River Forest Maywood Covenant succeed? And what role should the library have on the DEI committee?
In terms of on the DEI committee, I think we should have a seat at the table. I think we're a big stakeholder, and we have libraries have always been at the forefront of equity, diversity, and inclusion. I'm somewhat familiar with the Maywood Library. Several years ago, I was looking for a volunteer opportunity, and I went and sat at one of their board meetings. And one of the interesting things that I learned is that their parking lot is full, or at the time, this was a few years back, was full every evening after they closed. And the reason it was full were people were using the Wi-Fi. They were sitting in the parking lot using the Wi-Fi. When I did ask to volunteer there, I was told, unfortunately, they didn't have enough staff that they could even take on a volunteer. I know it doesn't quite make sense, but they didn't have enough staff to help work with the volunteer. Historically, pre-COVID, they had very limited hours. They weren't open on Sundays. They weren't open in evenings. They had limited hours on Saturdays. So I think there's a real opportunity that we can share some of our possible programming, some of our possible services with Maywood and create a real partnership and bring a much needed service to that community. I'd like to see that happen.
Thank you. Kathy, you're going to take the next question first. For educational events at the library, what are your ideas of how accessibility can be increased?
Well, one way that the library has increased accessibility, for example, is using closed captioning on its Zoom programs. It also, in its live story times that it's having on its YouTube channel, it incorporates sign language. And as far as increasing other educational opportunities at the library, it also providing access to Wi-Fi for children who may not have it at home and also who may not have computers to use at home. It can enhance their educational experiences that way. Also, after-school programs can be provided for children whose parents may work, and this may provide an educational opportunity for them with an after-school program.
Thank you. Anne?
In terms of accessibility, one, I love the fact that we on now Zoom do have the closed captioning, but I sort of would take a different direction. I've volunteered at the Oak Park Public Library, and there are two programs there that I think really bridge the gap and offer some accessibility. One is they have a bookmobile that they go out into the community during the summer, and they, in our town, it might be as simple as showing up at Saturday morning soccer games with a number of books. You can register patrons. Technology is there for checking out books, etc. So that allows some accessibility because you're meeting patrons where they are. But then on the other end of the spectrum, they also reach out to their community and deliver books to those people that can't make it into the library. Now, we are not Oak Park, obviously, but I like the ideas and the intentions behind both of those things in terms of going out more into the community and reaching people where they are and bringing materials and platforms to them to make things more accessible.
Thank you. Catherine?
I think once again that the tools that we've all been kind of forced to utilize over the past year could really benefit people who, especially I think in terms of maybe timing, simply can't be at an event. I know that this is always a question for story times, for example, because story times are during the middle of the day, and they have tried, evening story times, pajama story times, and often they don't get as good of attendance. And now there's a real benefit that they, even maybe after story times can happen in person, maybe they can be recorded and posted on YouTube still, so that people can access them at their own time, on their own schedule, repeat their favorites, things like that. I think that providing a blend of virtual and in-person services will allow people more access. I think that maybe the library can communicate more to different groups. I know the library, again, in pre-COVID times was out a lot at camps, at preschools, and maybe there could be more of a way to link those people back to the actual library itself and get those families to come in too.
Thank you. This will be the last question of the evening. Anne, you're going to start us off. What role can the library take to promote digital literacy among youth?
Well, youth is a big group of people, and digital literacy is a big topic. Right now, I think as a starting point, I think the library should be well vested and knowledgeable about what is going on in the school. I know there are, at least at Willard, a number of digital literacy programs that the librarian was regularly incorporating into her lesson plans with the students. So I think in going forward, I think there is an opportunity. I think we should be very consistent and be using similar language between what is being taught. So I think the first thing for the library to do is to really understand what is being taught in the schools, to kind of piggyback on that, and then also to identify whether or not there is a need for this. Now, if you talk to parents, there probably is, but I think the bigger issue would probably be under privacy, and so that young youth understand what it is they're saying yes to and how that information is being used. So that would be the area I think has probably the most opportunity for education.
Thank you. Catherine?
This is such an interesting question because I tend to think that we think of how can we bring digital literacy to an older generation that didn't kind of grow up with it, which I think the library does do a good job of. They have kind of clinics to help people through, help them maybe access books, library books through your Kindle, things like that. I think that there are a lot of digital services that are available and even aimed at younger children that the library has. Some of our digital services do have a good number of children's materials. Some of them are learning materials. Some of them are for pleasure. There's this great service database that I like to use. It's called Novelist. It helps you find your next read. It works for adults too, but they have a K-8 version that I think is really interesting. And I think that maybe communication is the missing piece in this. Maybe when the libraries, for example, promote the summer reading program this year will probably look a little different. Maybe they can also promote some of these apps, databases, services, and how families can use them.
Thank you. Kathy?
Could you repeat the question, please?
What role can the library take to promote digital literacy among youth?
Yeah, I think the youth may promote digital literacy among some of the adults. But the library can provide programs both to learn how to use various pieces of technology. And also a big piece of this would be content, as was suggested. Sometimes youth, they don't access appropriate content, or they have too much content and can't find the real answer among all the options that they have. So I think that a lot of the focus could be on educating them as far as what's online and what they should be looking for. That could be good information for them to use as they advance in school, and also to protect their privacy, to become aware of what they should and should not be revealing online. So yes, I think that there's a big role for the library, both in teaching them on hardware to use and also content.
Thank you. I'm going to do closing statements now. Catherine, you're going to be first. 1 minute closing statement. You can finish a thought from another question, or you can just do a closing statement.
Sure. Thank you again to Peggy, the League of Women Voters, the library, to my fellow candidates, and to all of you taking the time to listen to us. The library often uses the tagline, "Your journey starts here." And what a journey we've all had the past year, the library included. I'm excited about the opportunities for the next step of the library's journey as we look ahead to a post-pandemic phase. Working with our new director, integrating new service models with traditional ones, and expanding connections with other community organizations. I've been an asset to the library board over my first term, with contributions including structuring our finances, improving planning processes, and leading the search team for a director. I'm running for a second term because I think that my knowledge, skills, and dedication still provide value in the years ahead. I'm asking you to vote for me on April 6th. If you do, I can tell you that I'll be working to ensure the library helps you on your journey. Thank you.
Thank you. Kathy?
Thank you to the League and the library for hosting us. The core mission of the library is to serve the community. I've been a frequent user of the library for 2 decades, and I appreciate its excellent staff and offerings. Many of the issues the board addresses are ones that I've dealt with in my volunteer and professional work. My experience is especially applicable to 2 critical library initiatives. First, my volunteer work overseeing maintenance and rehab projects is particularly relevant as the library hopes to relocate some mechanical equipment and repurpose the space for patron use. Second, my fundraising and stewardship experience can help grow the Library Foundation as a source of non-tax dollars to support the library. My legal training and community involvement over the past 30 years provide me with the skills to be an effective trustee. Last summer, I started attending board and committee meetings so that I can contribute from day one. I ask for your vote, and I commit to working hard on your behalf to ensure that our library remains a jewel of our community. Thank you.
Thank you. Anne?
Hi, again, I want to express my thanks to everyone that's in attendance tonight, especially to Peggy and Megan, Peggy from the League of Women Voters and Megan from the library, as well as to the other candidates for being here tonight. I would like your vote too. I believe that I have, as a background as a librarian, I can be an advocate for not only patrons, the librarians, but also for you as River Forest residents. I would like to see the appeal of the library continue to broaden. I think we have to be very creative in our financing, in the types of programming that we can and cannot do. I am interested in getting involved with the upcoming strategic work that the library has in front of it. I believe myself to be a creative problem solver. I often see many possibilities among disparate things. And I truly believe that the library has the power to inform, inspire, and engage with all members of the community. And as a board member, I would like to work towards that end. Thank you.
Well, thank you, candidates, for participating and sharing your thoughts during this forum. And we also thank you for stepping up to serve your community. Anybody that has ever served on a board knows what the time commitment is away from your family. And so you should be applauded for making that move. You'll be able to view these recorded forums on the River Forest YouTube channel and also on the League's website and YouTube channel. And thanks again goes to the River Forest Library and Megan O'Keefe for all her work on getting these together. And Leslie Lauderdale, who was our timer today. Following this forum will be the River Forest Park Board Forum. You can still register for that if you'd like. And we hope you all go out to vote. Election is April 6th. And have a pleasant rest of the evening. Thank you, ladies. Did a great job.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.